Today at Expat Experts, we have a very special guest with us, Marie DeCosse. Marie is an entrepreneur and freedom advocate, and also the founder of NOMAD Travel Groups, a company that helps digital nomads create a life of freedom and fulfillment. And she worked herself all over the world, so we explore her journey as an expat, but also her vision on what digital nomad lifestyle means.
This is Expat Experts, the podcast that dives into the fascinating lives of those who've lived and worked across borders, exploring the challenges, experiences, and insights they've gained along the way.
But before we start with the episode, I want to remind to all listeners that the best way to stay tuned with the latest episodes is by hitting subscribe here on YouTube and in your favorite audio platform. For extra information about the podcast, check the website expatexpertspodcast.com or check the link in the description.
The Expat, Marie DeCosse.
So in the first part of the episode today, I would like to dive a little bit into Marie's life as an expat, but also as a digital nomad and person who travels all around the world, let's say like this, because I think there is a difference between being an expat and between being a nomad itself. And I think you live both. So it's very interesting that you can give the both perspective in there. Besides that, thank you so much, Marie, for joining the podcast today. Thank you for being here and dedicating some time for your schedule. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and it's always a pleasure to talk about travel. Travel is what I live for. I was sort of born into it. So I'm happy to talk about anything related to it. And with regard to your first question, so yes, I lived an expat lifestyle growing up. So my dad worked in economic development, and that necessitated a lot of travel and living abroad, particularly in emerging countries when I was younger. I was born in the DC area, but then we quickly moved to Madagascar. We spent some time there. And then we moved to Bangladesh, and we spent a little over 5 years there. And, I'm very appreciative for the experience that my family was able to give me, especially living abroad in my younger years. It's something that not a lot of Americans get to experience. And I think it is something that many more should, especially in emerging countries, because you get exposed to different ways of life. And I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was the communalistic culture versus individualistic culture. In the US, everything is about how quickly are you going to get ahead in your career? How much money are you going to make? Who has a bigger house than the next person? And people aren't that willing to help others out, even members of their family. But living in countries like Madagascar and Bangladesh, everything was about the community. You make money, you put it back into the community. If somebody needs help, you lend a helping hand, even if you don't know who that person is. If there are people that are struggling, if they don't have food, we would invite people over for dinner at times. It's just a different way of life. And it has a lot more to do with building community and just being a good person. And I'm really thankful that I had that experience. And I can go into other stories about Madagascar and Bangladesh in any other questions that you might have, but transitioning to living a digital nomad lifestyle. So that started happening after the pandemic. When we moved back from Bangladesh, it was business as usual as a typical American. So I went to public school, I went to college, and then I started working full time as an international tax analyst for a public accounting firm. And it was just, life was boring. Like, I felt like I'm not able to travel. I'm not feeling like I'm doing what I really want to do. And then the pandemic hit and it shook everything up. And I realized that I could work remotely, I could travel, and I could still fulfill my clients' needs. And that sort of ignited this spark of, okay, I don't have to do the typical 9 to 5. I can change things up in my home life so I can meet my passion for travel while still earning money, while still pursuing career interests. And so after the pandemic, when the border started opening up again, I was traveling frequently. I would spend time working remotely in New York, in DC. I went to Mexico for a little bit. I was in Portugal. I went to London. I was just bouncing around. And yes, you have to work in different time zones, but that's a necessary sacrifice when on your off hours, you get to explore beautiful new cities and meet different people. All these things that are prior to the pandemic, prior to this digital nomad lifestyle becoming a mainstream thing, luxuries that you only get to do when you're on vacation. And that's what, maybe once or twice a year if you're lucky. So being a digital nomad was my way to reconnect with my roots, to reconnect with the Maria who was living abroad, who found this passion through travel. And the pandemic was horrible. I would say the one good thing that came out of it was people realizing that you could live a more flexible lifestyle and the rebirth of this digital nomad fad.
Definitely. I think it opened doors internationally for a lot of companies to start realizing that even for the companies itself, if you take it from a business perspective, you are saving money on offices, equipments and stuff. So it's just like, for them, it was also beneficial, I think, for some of them at least.
Exactly.
So you said that you moved for the first time to Madagascar. Madagascar was the first move that you ever did. How old were you in that moment?
Yes, so I was, I would say, preschool going into first grade when we were in Madagascar. My sister was around the second grade. And so my memories of Madagascar are fairly sparse. What I do remember is we lived right next to these rice fields, and we would go out into the rice fields and sort of walk in like the narrow path that's in between the budding rice plants. And my sister, who is more of an adventurous, like very rambunctious girl when she was younger, she started running through the rice fields and then she fell in, and it was like mud that was so deep. And my dad came running out. Sorry, everyone. We're going to get into the business soon. But when you run a business, there is never, ever time off. People are always trying to get your attention. So I apologize for all the buzzing noises.
No worries.
But she went running through the rice fields. She fell in and she was waist deep. And I remember my dad having to run out there and pull her out. And he grabbed her arm and he pulled her quickly because there was tons of snakes in the rice fields and he didn't want her to get caught by one of them. And he ended up dislocating her shoulder. And we went running back to the house. And I have this vivid memory standing in the bathroom. My poor sister is crying and my dad is trying to wash her off and there's just mud going all down the drain. And I looked at her and I was like, "But did you have fun in the rice fields?" And she looks at me and she had this sort of shy smile and she was like, "Yeah, let's go back." So Madagascar, it was a fun start to my life. And I'm glad that I got to experience it with my sister. We were always just getting into things. We always wanted to adventure. We always imagined these fantasies of I'm, a queen in a castle and I have my animals and, I'm just ruling this land, all the things that children do. But it was beautiful that we were able to experience that in a completely different country because it makes you approach life in a different way and start dreaming about, what's possible outside of the confines of the US.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think like as a child, you also see it from a different perspective, I assume. No? And the thing like it's not the thing that you have in mind at that moment. It's something that you analyze afterwards of seeing like other people who hasn't passed through the same experience as you and maybe stayed in the United States forever or in their home country, never had this experience. Maybe they don't have this spark for, I don't know, traveling or this freedom that you were talking on becoming nomad and being able to, even if it requires some sacrifices, as you were saying, it doesn't something that comes intrinsically in a lot of people. They are home people. You said that this was mainly due to your dad's job, but you were moving the whole family.
Yes.
How was it for your family in general, and for you especially, to not have a place, or every certain time knowing that you need to move and that the thing was temporary?
I think so. For us, it was normal. Like I don't ever remember it being unusual to travel that frequently, because we started our lives doing it. We were just sort of born into this traveling family. And my mom is Senegalese. She grew up in Senegal, and then when she was pursuing her degree, she was living in France. That's where she met my father, and then they moved back to the US. So she lived a life abroad, and she came over to the US to start her life with us. And my dad, he, at the time that he had met my mom, he had been to, I don't know how many tens of many countries. He lived in Peru for a long time while he was doing his master's. He's always had this love for travel. And I remember him telling me when I got older, he said that I don't like to stay stagnant for too long. I feel like I am who I'm supposed to be when I'm traveling, when I'm working in a different country. So all of us have this passion for it. And I'm blessed that I had parents that sort of showed me the way. But what's beautiful about this rise in digital nomadism is that people who weren't born into a family like mine are tapping into what travel means and figuring it out. And it can be scary, going to a new country, you don't know the mechanisms. Maybe you're not familiar with traveling abroad that frequently. But people are having more of the guts to do it because it's becoming more of a popular thing. And I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful to travel because you learn about different people and it helps you understand other people. I think the world will be a little bit better if we all took the time to understand each other a little bit more.
Definitely. Exploring cultures opens normally a lot of our mind and our preconceptions of places. In your case,
Exactly.
I assume you also went to to undeveloped countries, to multiple of them.
Yes.
Do you remember this shaping your childhood, or like your way of seeing the world while being there, but also afterwards?
Yes. When we were in Bangladesh, because I was older and also because I wasn't really as sheltered from the socioeconomic disparities like I was in Madagascar. In Madagascar, I was at home most of the time, and then I was sort of driven to school, and then I had my community at school, but I wasn't exposed to life outside sort of those guidelines. Then when we moved to Bangladesh, I went to an international school. So folks from all over the world who were working in Bangladesh sent their kids there. That already started opening my mind up to different cultures and perspectives. But then outside of the school, you see so much disparity. It's unusual to visit a city where you see this beautiful, luxurious skyscraper right next to the slums. Like it's that adjacent, the disparity. And I wouldn't say that I ever got used to it. It wasn't something that I ever just welcomed as normal. You were always sort of shocked by the standards or the conditions that a lot of people had to live in, because they were born into a certain caste and there was very limited options for them to get out of it. So I think being exposed to that at a young age humbled me and made me really appreciative for what I was given. It makes you want to give back, but it also makes you want to explain to other people who have these preconceived notions about how other cultures operate that maybe they should take some time to actually be there to fully understand what goes on in an emerging country before they judge others and their way of life. I remember when I moved back to the US, I told people that I lived in Madagascar, I lived in Bangladesh, and people were like, "Oh, did you live in a cave?" I was like, that's not how it
Oh gosh.
that's not how it works. Like, there are people living in luxury apartment buildings. It's just the news only shows you one side. But yeah, again, it just goes back to how travel makes you understand things a little bit more.
You actually touched one of the points that I wanted to ask you about, because I'm always curious about the schooling system when you are a kid that moves around. How was this experience for you, and how do you manage like changing schools, and how is the system working for in these different countries?
I actually was really, really depressed when I left the school in Bangladesh and had to come back to the US. I loved going to school in Dhaka. So it was called AISD, the American International School of Dhaka. The schooling system was really great. They had teachers that were Bangladeshi or, foreign nationals who wanted to teach in Bangladesh. The quality of the schooling was great. The school in itself was a fairly large campus. We had any activity you wanted to do. There was swimming, there was track, there was basketball. Everything was at your fingertips. It was a really, really beautiful school. The class sizes were small, so I would say there were no more than maybe 10 to 11 kids in my class itself. So out of the entire third grade, maybe 30 kids. And the school hosted from first grade all the way through 12th grade. And it was all on the same campus. And I knew people who started at AISD and went all the way through and graduated and then went to really prominent universities in Canada or London. It was sort of their stepping stone to go into this young adult life of pursuing higher level education. So if there are any disparities, and I'm sure, depending on where you are, the quality of the education differs. But what a lot of people don't understand is when you're a foreign national living in an emerging country or another country, your government, they do take care of you, or the private company that you work for takes care of you. And generally the quality of the schooling is really good.
Yeah, makes sense. That I mean, they take care of giving a good image. No, I suppose also. What
Yes.
happens when you come back, though? It's like all the grades, all the studies that you have done are valid. You come back to a system in United States because you said that you went then into public school also in United States. How does this transfer from one to the other?
Yes, so we didn't have any issues with the credits that I had at the American International School in Dhaka transferring to public school in the US. And I think what my parents did before enrolling us in that school was just triple check that there wouldn't be any issues, because they knew that the contract period was going to be 5 years. So we would be moving back after that stint. I also know a lot of friends who were coming from Malaysia, we're coming from London, we're coming from other parts of the world, and they didn't have any issues with their credits transferring as well. As you move into high school, so from 9th grade through 12th grade, I'm sure there were some what we call in the US AP classes, so higher level classes, that maybe some of those credits didn't transfer, because I know a lot of schools are very particular. Like when you're now applying to colleges, they're very particular about what credits do or don't. But at least between the grades of first grade through 8th grade, there generally isn't that much of an issue with transferring.
Cool. In school, which kind of friends did you do as a kid? Like, it was always like you were surrounded by the international environment in that school, but did you have also local friends from Dhaka, for example, or from
I would say it was mostly people from the international school. So the folks that went to AISD, it wasn't just foreign nationals kids. There were a lot of Bangladeshi kids, Indian, Pakistani, who went to AISD, and they did because the quality of the education was high. So in Bangladesh itself, if you were a Bangladeshi local and you were able to put your child through schooling at AISD, that was the obvious choice. It was probably the best school to go to in Dhaka, which is the capital city. So I had a lot of friends who were from Bangladesh and Southeast Asia. And outside of AISD, it's kind of odd. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's probably an emerging country thing. But there were specific clubs that you would go to depending on your nationality. So there was the American club, there was the Swedish club, the Dutch club. Okay. I think there was the French club. Like there were these clubs that they weren't restrictive, but if you were a foreign national from that country, you were automatically sort of given membership. And then as kids, you would go to this club and invite your friends there. So I remember going to the American club often, and that they had tennis courts and a swimming pool. And I would invite my friends from AISD and we would all hang out there. And then you meet more kids through there. And then you go to the French club because somebody invited you, and you meet other people through that network. So it's this unusual sort of connection you have with fellow expats. And then I would say prominent Bangladeshi individuals, like their kids.
I see. Nice. Do you keep contact with any of these people? Do you still have contact with someone from your youth in Bangladesh?
I do, yeah. So my sort of core girl group when I was younger, they're now living in different parts of the world. I met up with one of them when I was in London last year, and it was really great to see her. And then another friend is in California doing amazing things. And 2.5, maybe 3 years ago was the last I saw her in person. But then because, we live in a social media era, it's so easy to keep up with them. They're all friends on my Instagram. And so I can see what they're doing, and it's really nice.
Cool. Do you remember any experiences, any stories, like any funny stories, any, I don't know, stories that impacted you or that you still remember? Because sometimes we forget no stories when we are kids, but some of them are always there. So that's the important ones from your time in Bangladesh.
Yeah, let me see what's the probably funniest story. There's one story that's maybe not, it's funny to me now, but I also am embarrassed. My first boyfriend was Swedish, and it was just one of those like third grade relationships where you're nervous to talk to the person. So we would always pass notes through our cubby. So he would put a note in my cubby and then I'd read it, and it was like what I would look forward to all day. It was just to be able to read this note, because I didn't have, it's not like we had phones like we do now. So the only time I could hear from him was either at recess or through these notes. And I remember I was obsessed with his hair because he had this long flowy hair, and it was like he was Prince Charming, really into, princesses and Barbies and everything at the time. And then one day he showed up to school and he buzzed all of his hair off. Like everything was gone. And I remember coming up to him on the playground and I was like, "What did you do to your hair? Why didn't you tell me that you were going to cut all of your hair off?" And he was like, "It's just easier for me to play soccer." And I remember going back to class after recess and I started crying because he was no longer Prince Charming in my mind. So then I wrote him a note and I said, "I'm so sorry, but we're over." And I put it in his cubby. I feel now looking back on it, I'm sure he thinks back on it and laughs or doesn't even remember that happened. But it's just one of those silly things when you're a kid, like somebody cutting their hair is the worst thing in the entire world.
Small things can be big,
exactly.
depending on whose eyes are there, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I wanted to ask you also, we touched a little bit about the school when you come back, but because in the latest episodes, I talk with a lot of people who went back home. So and the fact of repatriation, it's also something that it's not normal, or it's not easy for everyone. You left the country, you left it somehow, but then when you come back, it's something different. Your friends also change, your family also changed, the environment has changed completely. Do you remember at what
Yeah.
age did you come back to the United States?
So I was 11 or 12, I think, after I was going into the 6th grade. So I think 11 or 12 years old.
So nearly entering high school directly at that point. Yeah.
Yes, entering middle school.
Me too. And how was your going back home experience? Like, how did it feel for you?
It was really difficult. It was a huge adjustment. I wasn't used to the public schooling and system in the US. I had never really been exposed to it. What I remember, I think the biggest differentiator was, again, coming back to the aspect of community. When we were overseas, I think because we all bonded over the fact that we were, in a country that wasn't our birth country, people were just more open with each other. If there was a new person who started, at that school, they were immediately welcomed. It wasn't this sort of, there was no bullying, like, at least with the people that I surrounded myself with, everyone just liked each other. And then I moved back to the US, and the first thing I noticed was sort of people being segmented by their racial background. That was the first thing that I noticed, especially in the cafeteria. You had African American people generally grouped together one side. You had Caucasian people grouped together on another side. It was almost like I was walking into like a prison cafeteria, and now I have to figure out where I'm going to sit. And it was the biggest shock, because I wasn't used to seeing color like that, because I grew up in a very diverse environment where everybody was just friends with each other. And then you come back to the US, and then you have to figure out, and decide what group you're going to be a part of, which one is going to accept you. And that was really difficult. It took me a really long time to find my place. It was hard for me to make friends. And I just remember developing a severe social anxiety from 7th grade through 9th grade. I had really bad social anxiety. And it wasn't until my father got me involved in playing tennis frequently with a group outside of school that helped me sort of break out of my shell a little bit more and start to come back to myself, start to be a little bit more normal. But yeah, the moving back experience, it was really, really tough.
It's a common pattern, but I assume as a child it's even more. I mean, it's not an age that you should be figuring out things like, I don't know, why segregation of race, no, for example.
Right.
And I assume when you when you raise up and you grow up in a society that is implicit in it, you don't notice it. But as soon as you enter from outside, from some years of being out of it, the shock, it must be hardcore. It is difficult for adults. For a kid, I assume it's even worse, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe switching a little bit into more digital nomad. You already said that this trigger was like the post-pandemic, the capacity of like during the pandemic, I assume, like discovering that you could work from home. And then after that, when the borders starting traveling around, are you traveling all the time? How does it work for you? Do you have a base camp where you consider home and then you travel here and there? Or how is your life structured traveling wise?
Yeah, so I have a base camp. My base camp is Denver, Colorado. I've been in Denver for almost 5 years now. I moved here right after college. I have a travel bug. So if I sit anywhere for longer than 2 months, I just start getting this itch. I need to go somewhere, even if it's, into the mountains, a 3.5 hour drive. At least I'm away from where I have been sitting for the past 2 months. So because I've been building this company, this summer has not involved that much travel, which has been really difficult. But like, let's take last year, for example. I went to New York twice. I was in Philly. I went to DC. I went to London. I went to Portugal. I was in Spain for a little bit. I went to California, Vancouver, and Seattle. And that's just within a year. And I needed to do it. And, you know, there's ways where you just find good flights, good affordable flights, and you get it done. But I always come back to base camp. I think having base camp is really important because travel helps you figure certain things out about yourself. And then when you come back to where you feel comfortable, where you feel situated, that's where you can put what you have learned about yourself, how you need to advance this or that into actual practice.
Nice. I think it's important to have somewhere that you consider home. No, I assume it's giving also an inner peace of like, okay, if something happens, I have where to go back.
Exactly.
What are you work with a lot of nomads. We will enter with the fact that you created a company. You said this year, so it's a pretty new project.
Yeah. So the founding date was August, I think 14th, 2023. So we're a little over a year now.
Nice. But you start traveling before building the company itself, meaning that you were capable of continue working remote for the company that you were working during pandemic, or you switch in there?
Yeah, so I actually ended up switching companies. I was working for a public accounting firm through the pandemic that went fully remote like every other company, but then once the pandemic started slowing, had a mandatory 3 days in office return to work policy. And I was like, oh, heck no, I'm not doing that. So I quit and I moved to another company that offered me a fully remote role so that I could continue traveling.
Nice. One of the biggest questions that I always get, like, do you then, how do you balance friends and relationships with being a nomad? Like, how do you build community or like try to stay with a circle of friends and family?
Yeah, well, the beautiful thing about being a nomad, and the longer you do it, the more community you build in different countries that you go to, is that you have resources to tap into all over the world. And travelers are very open with providing connections. Oh, you want to do this? Oh, I have a friend who can, get that trip planned for you. Oh, you're going to London. Oh, you need to check out this restaurant or cafe or meet up with my friend here. So I think building community was not difficult at all, especially when you do solo trips, because people are engaging in a solo trip in order to build community, make friends, and get out of their comfort zone. Where I found that I was lacking was with my community at home. So especially when I was traveling for longer stints, I'd be so focused on what I was doing in that country, and I would just neglect my family, or I would neglect my friends who have been friends for years. And they know who I am, especially my family. We're all very independent people. We just work best when we're away from each other. So they know that there is going to be periods of times where they're not going to be able to get in touch with me. But when I return home, I try to, make it a point to reconnect with the people that I haven't been able to speak to in a while, just check in on them and make sure that they're doing okay.
What about building strong connections with these people? Like, because sometimes even as an expat, you go to these meetups or you go to this, I don't know, whatever it is. And yes, you meet people and it's kind of easy to meet people over the wall all the time, wherever you go. No, but having deep friends or real friends and deep connections with people, it's where it gets complex. Was this experience for you?
I think that just happens over time. So you can't force anything, but you have this feeling, right, where you know that you immediately hit it off with somebody and your personality is just very similar, or it just works well together. So in, those first few weeks, you're having fun lightly within a group of people, but then that's where social media comes in handy. So you keep into contact with them, check in on them through the app. And then generally what I've found is the people that I've built strong connections with end up coming with me on a trip. So I had a friend that I met through traveling. I kept in contact with her on social media. My friends and I were planning a trip to Panama, and I asked her to come with me, and then she came and she bonded with all of my close girlfriends, and that just, that sort of roots that friendship. So it takes time, but it's important to not forget the people that you had a good connection with, and try to plan a more intimate trip with them just to keep exploring that friendship.
What are the biggest misconceptions that you find when you say, "Hey, I'm a digital nomad," or the stereotypes that people have when you say, "I live like this. This is my lifestyle"?
I think there are people who think that you just don't work. You're digital nomads, so you must have a lot of family money and you're just able to travel frequently. Or, you're a hippie and you just want to bounce around different countries. But that's not what it is at all. Digital nomads have found a way to work frequently, earn their money like anybody who's going into an office would, continuously advance their career, and do so in a way that works for their lifestyle. So yeah, I think the biggest misconception is how are you making money? And that's usually members of the older generation who the concept of being a digital nomad is just a completely new concept for them.
Yeah. Can't imagine. I mean, even when you're an expert, sometimes they tell you, how do you work from home? I only need my computer to work. So, yes.
Yeah.
So related, but maybe not 100% related. What are the biggest challenges that you faced in your own journey as a digital nomad until now?
I think the biggest thing for myself and for a lot of digital nomads is the cost. It's why I founded my business, so that there could be a more equitable travel solution. But the cost is huge. And that's why a lot of people a lot of digital nomads don't hang on to their primary property or their base camp, because the cost of keeping up with rent or mortgage payments for that, plus your flight costs, plus your accommodation, food for, as much as you want to travel frequently, is a lot. It's a lot of money. So yeah, it really all comes down to that. If we were able to take away costs, people would be traveling a lot more frequently.
How do you reduce costs? I suppose this enters a little bit into the NOMAD Travel Groups a little bit, also why you created the company. We will dig into it, but how are your tips and tricks for anyone who's dreaming of becoming a digital nomad and encounters these challenges? How do you reduce these costs, for example?
So I'm a huge proponent for cooking your meals at home, buy your groceries, cook your breakfast and lunch at home, and then, choose certain restaurants that you're really excited about to spend that money on, or street food. I'm a huge fan of street food, and people need to eat it more often because that's where you're going to get the really quality stuff. But when it comes to expenses, reconsider how you're approaching food. Reconsider just spending frantically on buying new clothes here and there. You really don't need to have that much, and you want to pack light when you're traveling, because if you don't, there's other expenses that come in, like paying for your checked bag wherever you go, lugging it everywhere. I know a lot of people are fans of hostels. I'm not a huge fan of hostels because for me, it's more of a safety and comfort thing. It also depends on the country that you go to. The quality of hostels varies. So look into accommodation that way. And then also opt for public transportation. Bus systems and train systems are great in most countries, and they keep costs low. So instead of always opting for flights, if you want to travel from one country to the next, look for a bus, look for a train that's going to get you there, and you're going to be able to see beautiful things along the way. I think those are the biggest ones. And then really just keeping track of your expenses. So I was using Mint, which is an app to track how much I was spending. Usually before I travel, I put a set budget of I'm not going to spend more than this when I'm in this country. And if I'm starting to find myself inching towards the top end of that budget, then looking at all of my expenses, seeing, what's getting taken out, where can I cut costs, just to make sure that I'm on track. Don't just spend willy-nilly because your credit card is not going to like it once you return home.
Definitely. And it's also a piece of plastic, so it's easy to use sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe the last question about nomad life, although I have a last section that I want to talk with you about, more like personal reflections and recommendations because you traveled around and I'm sure you've touched a lot of cultures, food, restaurants and places. So I want to talk about that quickly afterwards. But what is, in your opinion, the difference between a digital nomad and an expat? You've lived in the both worlds, let's say like this. Do they have different challenges? Is really a different full life?
I would say so. I think there's similarities and differences. In terms of the biggest difference, an expat is they're uprooting their life, right? They're moving their entire life to a particular country and spending an extended period of time in that one country. And that's a big shift that requires a lot of planning, a lot of strategy, and a lot of just getting used to this one country or culture that you're now immersing yourself in. A digital nomad is not necessarily getting rid of their security, their community, their home. They can still maintain this base, this sort of safety mechanism in their home country while exploring other countries, bopping around. So I would say digital nomad is much more transient, and an expat has to make the decision to be sedentary in a country that is not their own. In terms of similarities, though, it all comes down to this connection to explore the world, to want to see the way that other people live, to want to immerse themselves in it, and the want to be uncomfortable, because you have to be uncomfortable when you're moving or visiting a country that is not your own. And that just, I think a lot of it is just a passion for travel that expats and digital nomads share.
Nice. Just a last question. It just popped up and I really wanted to ask you about it. It's, how do you feel? I mean, I'm sure that you heard it and probably experienced it at some places. There is a big discussion right now about digital nomads increasing the price of the cities and the countries where they are going to live, for example. No, what is your opinion on that? I mean, I'm from Barcelona, and there isn't a strong right now movement of what is happening because our flats are going so crazy high that nobody can live in Barcelona anymore. No, it's the case of Venezia, a little bit the case, but I don't know if it's, in your opinion, it's only, I know that it's not only about the digital nomads, but what is your vision on, or like the opinion on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid concern, right? You have people coming from countries where, let's say the median income is a lot higher, and then driving money into countries that haven't shifted standards in terms of income for their own residents. And so you're creating this disparity. The government wants to encourage travel. They want to encourage funneling money into their economy, but then there aren't ways to boost up their own residents so that they can participate in this shift of standard. I think this is where we need to really have companies like Airbnb and VRBO, come to the table and see what they're doing to assist this disparity. The reason that I like home exchange is because it's not a short-term rental. You're not driving up the cost of rent, right? It's a home swap. You're not creating new properties for people to now buy at a higher price point. That property was already there and you're swapping into it. So you're not contributing to economic disparity. You're just, utilizing a property like you would swap into a friend's home. I think it's a lot more of an economical approach. I think it's a lot more of a morally conscious approach, because we do have to pay attention to how digital nomadism is going to shape economies. And unfortunately, it takes the government a really long time to come up with standards to regulate. But you can call private companies to the table to see what they're doing to contribute to this.
Totally agree. I mean, it's happening, so we need to find solutions.
Right.
In general, it's not a matter. Okay, then I would say that just to close the first part of the episode, I wanted to ask you some personal recommendations about things that you've uncovered. It can also be about your expat life in Bangladesh or Madagascar, but do you remember any local traditional or cultural practices that lasted a big impression on you that you wouldn't expect that in the countries that you visited so far?
Yes. So I guess cultural practices that I didn't really expect. Having a mom who is Senegalese, I was sort of taught, because I'm half. My mom is Muslim. My dad is Catholic, and so I grew up in a two faith household with two completely different cultural practices. So I learned both. And when it came to my mom's side, in Senegal, you eat with your hands, and there's a certain way that you do it. It's not just you. There's a respect factor that comes with sharing food, especially a communal bowl, and then eating with your hands, and a cleanliness factor. So there were certain things that were baseline in terms of cultural practices that I'd already grown up understanding and was exposed to. So I wouldn't say there was anything that sort of completely shocked me. But what I will say is, when we were in Trimangal, which is a little, it's a community or a city that's close to Dhaka, maybe like a 3-hour, 4-hour. It was a trip in order to get there. Mm-hmm. And we would go there a few times a year, because my dad was doing some agricultural work with the company he was working for in the area. And it was a really small town, almost like a village. And I remember sharing food with a family who opened up their home to us in order to have a meal. And, the cultural standard is, and a lot of Americans don't know this, whatever food they serve you, you eat it. If you're vegan, if you're gluten-free, whatever, this is a family who doesn't have much, and it's a big show of respect in order to put food on the table for you. So you eat it, no matter what it is. And I remember this has already been drilled into my head from my mom. So I wasn't shying away from the food, but there were certain things that I didn't want to eat because I wasn't familiar with what it is, but I did. And it surprised me how amazing it was. It didn't look super appetizing, but it was this beautiful concoction of spices and flavors that I had never been exposed to before. There was mystery meat that I didn't question what it was, and it was good. And so, what I will say, especially when you're in emerging countries, pay attention to what it takes for people to put food on the table for you. However many weeks worth of a salary for them to give you this food that they don't need to, but they're doing it as a sign of respect. And take the time to understand what it took to prepare it. Take the time to understand how it applies to their life and their culture, and eat it, because it will surprise you. I promise you, 9 times out of 10, it's going to blow you away.
Cool. Well, maybe last question before we jump to the expert part. It's related to food. Any food or drinks that you have discovered during your journey that if you could, you would bring to everywhere you go, like that you would put in your backpack and always have it there?
Yes. When I was in, it wasn't Bali, it was Ubud. One of my friends from Bangladesh, her family had a property out there. And we went, and it was I forgot exactly what the cultural term for it was, but it was like this pig roast. And they roasted it all day and the skin was super, super crispy. And then they sliced it off of the pig and they put it into this banana leaf with a little bit of rice and then some like side condiments and this sort of like vinegary spice over the top. Oh my gosh. I like continuously dream about this one meal that I had way back when. And if I could find it, there's no restaurant in Denver. I'm sure there's one in New York that has Indonesian food, but nothing like that. So if I could recreate it, if I could go back to that moment in time and just try to write down exactly what went into creating this meal, I would.
Well, maybe that's the opportunity. If there is any Indonesians listening to this episode or anyone who knows exactly the name and the recipe for it, just put it in the comments of the episode, and then we can check it out and try to reproduce it. Probably not as tasty as an original one, but still do it.
Please,
with that said,
I would appreciate it.
Yeah. I would say that we can jump directly into the second part. And hey there, everyone. If you're loving this episode so far and you want to stay tuned with other expat experiences, make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow our podcast so you never miss an episode. With that said, let's go back to the episode.
The Expert, home swap with NOMAD Travel Groups.
You already shared with us that you created the company a little bit longer than a year ago. So the company is called NOMAD Travel Groups.
Yes.
Explain this a little bit, what it's about, what you offer.
Sure. So NOMAD Travel Groups is a home exchange platform. And what we do is we've introduced a group-based approach to home swapping. So our customers sign up for our site, list their property, and then choose the listings that they prefer. We match them into a curated group of travelers, give them a shared calendar, give them group messaging features so that they can coordinate their travel plans, list when their homes are going to be available, and ultimately build relationships and trust with one another so they can engage in affordable stays at each other's homes. And what Nomad really is for people who want to be digital nomads, right? Want to live a location independent lifestyle, but are not yet ready to get rid of their home, their security, their base camp. And so you can hold on to it, but you're holding on to it within a group of travelers whose homes you want to access so that you can travel frequently and affordably. So what it's doing is it's lowering the cost of accommodation. A stay with Nomad costs $250 per week on average. Giving people the ability to travel more frequently and giving people the ability to build a community of travelers who they build trust and relationships with, and just really facilitating this mechanism of secure, affordable, and safe travel.
Interesting. Does that mean that your travel group is always the same? So eventually what it means is that you're always swapping houses with the same people, and meaning you have a reduced access of which houses do you have access to, or?
So the way that it works is you have travel groups of 2 persons, 3 persons, or 4 persons. And the duration of those groups are 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. Currently, we're in our MVP state, which means the minimum viable version of our website. We're involved in funding rounds right now to enhance our website capabilities. Once we engage in our full build, our customers are going to be able to engage in multiple concurrent travel groups. So I could be in a travel group of 3 for 6 months, and also at the same time be in a travel group of 2 for 12 months, at the same time be in a travel group of 4 for 3 months. It's really up to our customers how many travel groups they want to participate in, the size of the travel group, and the duration of the travel group. So that just opens up so many more properties to you.
Nice. Do you bring the travel groups yourself? So meaning that you and 2 friends in a travel group of 3 persons. It's you and your friends, or it is also like a kind of matching system of saying, I want to travel solo, and then I contact this person, and then I decide if it's the correct person to travel with or not.
So it's a matchmaking system, and the way that we sort it is you select the listing. So you look at all of the listings on our homepage. These are supplied by individuals who have signed up for the site and listed their property same as you. And you choose the listings that you prefer. So I want to be in New York and I want to be in LA. So I like this listing in New York and I like this one in LA. I select the two and I submit my preferences to Nomad. Nomad then applies our matchmaking system. And the way that we do it is we try to meet at least one of your selections when we place you into your curated travel group. So the connection that everybody has in that travel group is they have selected at least one of those properties in that group. We've been applying already AI testing to enhance our matchmaking mechanism. Right now, the criteria is based off of listing and location. But what we're doing is studying our user feedback, studying what people liked, didn't like, any enhanced criteria that we can use to feed into our AI model to facilitate not just listing and location preference matchmaking, but also other criteria that will enhance the curated group experience.
Very interesting. So it's on building on the MVP. It's also like you're doing usability testing. I'm a UX designer, so
yes.
you triggered my curiosity now also.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Good. It's good practice that you're testing it like properly.
Right.
What about like, so does that mean that when you register to Nomad itself, you need to yes or yes? So I have two questions in regards of this. Yes or yes, put your house for swap, or you can register without having a property? And the second one is, can you register being a couple, for example? Do you want to do this, but you're not a single profile, you're two persons?
Yes. So to answer your first question, you have to have a property in order to participate on our platform. Mm-hmm. That's what differentiates us from short-term rental platforms, right? In order to participate in a home swap, you have to have a home to swap. Otherwise, you aren't able to. And yes, for your question about couples, if you're a couple, you are absolutely permitted to use our site. What we do is we run background checks. So at least one member of that couple must participate in a full background check powered by our partner Stripe Identity. And you also have to upload documentation verifying that the listed address is registered in your name. And then you have to provide the full legal name of your guest. So as we go through, and the guest meaning your partner, as we go through multiple, V2, V3 iterations of our site, we'll figure out ways to enhance our screening of couples primarily. But at the very least, you're required to submit the other name of that partnership if they will be traveling with you.
I see. When you use swap, like when we swap a home, might it be that there is other persons also, like a group concept, meaning like, or it's always you?
No, so we always guarantee entire properties for safety and security. We don't permit shared dwellings, what we call them, to be listed on our site. So if you have a roommate, unfortunately, we're not currently allowing your listing.
Okay. And what about the rented properties? Because that's also like, I don't know if in the US it's a different legislation, or I suppose in each country will change, no? But I'm pretty sure, for example, in certain countries of Europe, you are not able to home swap with other people if you're not the owner of that property.
Yes. So currently we're operating just in the US, Canada, and Mexico. But in terms of rentals, so when it comes to home swapping, there is fairly little regulation, especially in the US, which gives us a little bit more leeway. But at the end of the day, we always safety is number one concern. And we like to advise our customers who are renters to review their lease agreements, because there's specific language within the lease agreement that specifies the amount of time you're allowed to have a guest at your home, whether it's per month or for the entire lease. And so what we say is, if you're engaging in a home swap, pay particular attention to that specific amount of time. Let's say you're not allowed to have a guest for more than, 10 days per month. Okay, engage in a home swap for 9 days per month or 5 days per month. Just make sure that you're falling in line with those lease parameters. But yes, if you are a renter, you are permitted to use our site. And that's typical for most home exchange platforms that are based in the US as well.
Cool. I think you touched one of the biggest questions that you should probably get, and it is it safe? How you ensure that nothing happens to your home? No, because it's your home. So a lot of people must be, I assume, concerned about their property. I don't know. Accidents can always happen, I assume, but that nobody steals your stuff or break everything. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a fair question. And I would have the same question if I were signing up for a site or I was unfamiliar with home exchange. What we do is we partner with Stripe Identity to run full background checks on our customers before they're placed into a travel group assignment. What Stripe Identity does is they request a copy of your government issued ID. You upload a picture, and then they take a live capture of your face at the time of submission to match your actual face to the government ID. We then get notified whether or not that background check clearance was flagged or if it was verified. If it's flagged, then we look into it further. Obviously, if it's rejected, then we don't post your listing on our site and you're not placed into a travel group assignment. The second thing that we do is request a copy of the listed address just to verify that it's listed in your name. So as part of our home registration process, customers upload a bank statement or a mortgage document or a lease agreement, anything that has your full legal name plus the listed address. We verify that information manually. And if there's any issues there, we request new documents, or if you're not providing them, we don't post your listing on our site. In terms of taking care of your home, we've partnered with Superhog, which is actually I believe it's a UK-based brand. And what they do is they provide guest damage protection coverage of up to $50,000 for any damages that may occur while a member is participating in a home swap arrangement at your home. Our customers have the option to add on this guest damage protection coverage whenever a member of their travel group requests stay at their home. And we always encourage it because it's under our Nomad Light plan, it's only $5 per day of stay. So definitely opt into it so you can make sure you can get up to $50,000 in coverage. So there's 3 things that we do to promote the safety and security of members, participating in home swaps, which is important because it's your home and we want to make sure that it stays safe. But the last thing is just the mechanism of travel groups in general. It's a small group of people who have selected each other's properties as properties that they like. This is far different than participating in an Airbnb arrangement where thousands of people can access your home, stay there for 1 week, mess it up, and then, run away and never come back. These are people that are swapping into each other's homes. So there's already a baseline level of respect and care there that's different than engaging in a short-term rental arrangement.
I see. Yeah, it makes sense. No, so it's building a little bit of a community of people, and although you actually never met them, no, because probably when you are having your home free, it's when you are not there. So
right,
you only talk.
You've never met. Yeah, no, and it's unusual, but this is the way that our society operates, right? You don't meet most people whose homes you stay at Airbnbs or VRBOs, but you still do it. But at least we have our group messaging feature, right? So you can communicate with them, you can build relationships with them. And then in V2 of our site, you can actually call them you can get on a video call and chat with them before participating in that home swap arrangement, all to make sure that you feel safe and you feel comfortable.
Cool. I had a question also like popping up when you were talking about the length, no? So for example, you can say, okay, I want to travel group for 3, 6, and 12 months, I think you said.
Right.
What happens in both cases? Either like you sub your home with someone and you need to go back home earlier than planned because of, I don't know, any emergency or whatever. And the other way around, I'm at someone's place and suddenly I need to leave for whatever reason.
Yeah, so what we do in the event of that is we refund the staying party's fees. So the service fees that they paid to stay at that member's home. We also have the host who needed to return pay out a cleaning fee to the staying party. And this is compensatory for, any shifts in plans that may result in that party needing to get a hotel or temporary living accommodation in order to facilitate the return back home. What we also do is we highly encourage, and this is just for any traveler, we highly encourage you to have travel insurance, because your travel insurance covers issues like this, needing to get a hotel for a one night stay or, needing to get a quick return flight home. That's going to cover events like this. So we foresee it happening, right? But we have protocols in place to make sure that that individual is compensated.
I see. Cool. Well, nice to see that they have a safety net also for that case. Maybe a little bit more personal on your journey, like as an entrepreneur now, building your own. How has been it? It's not an easy journey, I assume. Like you came from having a corporate work, no? So how was this experience of building your own company? What challenges did you find in the way until now?
It's when you're building your own company, you're learning something new every single day. When I started out, it was just this idea that I had. I started researching, the home exchange market. I started making sure you have to be 100% sure that the way that you're differentiating is unlike anything a company is currently doing, and that you're able to create attraction because of the size of your serviceable addressable market, or the size of your projected or target audience year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So what's helpful is I had my tax and accounting background that helped me dig into the weeds and do all of that research and be really meticulous. But then you find that there's areas that you don't have expertise in. So I didn't have expertise in marketing. I had no dev background, dev or design, just no technology background at all. So there's all these pieces of the puzzle that you need to find. And that's what's so important about building a great team of people who are bringing in this expertise and also believe in your mission and the vision. And so the first person that was brought onto the Nomad team was my CTO, Ibrahim Say. He is a full stack web developer. He was actually working with other startups on building out web applications prior to joining the Nomad team. He brought on 4 other members who work, part-time as independent contractors to refine other versions, to refine other parts of our site. We brought on a senior developer, a senior designer. We were contracting portions of the MVP out to a company called Fetchly that did the majority of the lift with assistance from the Nomad team. And then we just recently brought on a project manager who is brilliant and is getting things organized and in line so that we're a full-fledged team. So it's constantly trying to fill in pieces of the puzzle, learn things that are out of your comfort zone. But, if you believe in what you're doing and you start to see traction, it's like this drug and you can't get enough of it. And you need to continuously do what you can, especially with a team of people relying on you. Do what you can to take this vision to the next level.
I am assuming that your colleagues also work remote. You don't probably are
Yes.
they all digital nomads? Are they all traveling around?
So one of my colleagues is in France right now, and I'm so jealous. And then she's going to Asia. One thing we spoke about before we offered the contract was whether or not she was going to be able to work from France or whether or not she was going to be able to work from Asia and if that was okay. And I remember working as a full-time employee of other companies, I was always scared to ask that question because company protocols are always, no, you cannot spend, time in a foreign country. That's just off the table. You're not allowed to do that. But Nomad's different. And I want my colleagues to be able to roam around. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason we're building what we're building. So yes, she's a digital nomad. My other colleagues, I think right now are more fixated in one place, but as the team expands, I'm sure we're going to get more travelers on the table.
I mean, it makes sense. No, you're building a product for digital nomads, the people who is attracted to these kind of companies are also digital nomads. And and besides that, there is also this trickiness always of the company saying, "Oh, this is not possible," but you are theoretically only binded to taxation over 183 days of your life, of your year. So
Right.
it is legal from a legal perspective. Don't get scammed on that also.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of questions. Yes, just sorry. Yeah.
I want to just tap into that because you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the reason companies don't want fully remote workforces, right, is because of tax issues. It's about sales tax or foreign income tax issues by way of physical presence. So what we've done is actually created a solution for companies using the same mechanism that we're using for our B2C channel. So we're opening up a B2B channel, so selling to businesses, our travel group mechanism, but it's going to be curated by members of that company or employees of that company. So what we'll do is we'll create employee-based home exchange groups, and then we retrofit our shared calendar feature to implement company-specific protocols that regulate how much time you can spend in state, what states you can visit, and how much time you can spend in country to make sure that you don't trigger any sales tax or foreign income tax issues. Digital nomadism is a quote unquote problem that is not going away. And executives know that they have to offer remote work roles in order to attract top talent. So by providing companies with a way to encourage travel, to encourage employee relationship building, while also offering enhanced oversight, control, and mitigating tax exposure, we're really excited about the feedback that we're going to get from our B2B clients and hope that, by implementing this and starting from small businesses through enterprise level, we will be able to encourage digital nomadism and in a way that's safe and secure for most companies.
Oh, that's very nice also. So you're also thinking of futuristic approach on B2B, which is also cool because it's always the nightmare for any expat, any digital nomad at the end. It's always the same. No, you enter this and then it's like, shit, now calculating, I'm spending more time here than there. Where do I need to pay my taxes and everything? And not everyone has access to an accountant everywhere where they go. So that makes sense also. Maybe related to that topic, it's probably the last question for today, but what is your vision? I mean, you're in an MVP, you're building new versions. I can feel that there is a lot of things coming. So maybe what if you can share some of them, whatever you can share, what is your vision for the future of Nomad? What is the impact that you are trying to achieve with the platform?
So, what we're really trying to achieve is giving people access to ways to travel that are either affordable or they're curated, meaning they speak to a particular group of people, or lowering misconceptions that businesses have about travel. It's not something that is going to impact your company adversely, let's actually look at it on the flip side. This is something that's going to make your company a lot more marketable, bring in higher level talent. And we're giving you a way to facilitate this without exposing your company to taxation issues, which is the primary reason that you're not letting your employees travel more frequently. So what we're doing is we're coming at it with a B2C and a B2B approach that's going to reshape the way that people approach travel, make work-life balance much more of a priority, all in an effort to create an interconnected world that takes the time to understand different cultures, different experiences, and doesn't look at, going into the office and doing a 9-to-5 as the only thing that you can do in your life. You can build your career and you can travel at the same time. So I'm just looking to share my passion for travel with the world. That is my vision for NOMAD Travel Groups, and coming up with innovative solutions to ensure that people can travel more frequently. Other iterations that we've been approached to create an exciting collaboration with a particular community that will create a nomad-specific portal for members of that community. And I can't announce it just yet, but this is how we are going to iterate. There's a nomad base plan. There's going to be various other nomad collaborations that speak to your particular interests or who you identify as. There's going to be a nomad business rollout. And then the last one, I can't mention, that's going to be in a few years. But we're very excited with how we're approaching this, and already excited by the traction that we've built.
Cool. Happy to see, and looking forward to check what becomes Nomad and where it goes.
Thank
you so much. Thank you so much for the time, for explaining your life, your experience as an expat, as a digital nomad. I think we went a little bit stage by stage through your life. I think. Thank you also for explaining what Nomad is, what Nomad Travel Groups is, and how it works. Probably the last question that it's relevant for all of our listeners is, where can they find you, how they can log in, how they can sign up to Nomad, but also maybe get in contact with you if needed.
Yes.
We can put all the links
so please,
in the description.
Give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok at We Travel Nomad. Our website is wetravelnomad.com. We're on LinkedIn at NOMAD Travel Groups. And please say hi. I'd love to hear who's listening to this. If you have any, thoughts about being an expat or being a digital nomad or whatever, I'd love to chat with you. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Marie DeCosse. I would love to hear from you.
Cool. Again, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining the episode, and of course to all the listeners. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and take care.
Thanks so much. It was great speaking with you.
You've been listening to Expat Experts, the podcast that takes you around the world through the stories of those who've lived it. Subscribe now to YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, and stay tuned for more inspiring interviews.